Constant theme of the show, education choice, strong advocate here over at the New England Take, and I'm excited to be joined today by a first-time guest of, his name is Ben DeGrow. He's the Senior Policy Director for Education Choice over at ExcelinEd. Go to excelined.org to learn more. I'll also put a link in the episode description on that. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I've previously had many times our friends who manage the education freedom accounts here, the Children's Scholarship Fund of New Hampshire, Kate Baker Demers. She's been on the show a few times. She's an awesome advocate for this space. And recently, New Hampshire Democratic governor candidates have been having all sorts of discussions when it comes to education because it's the funding for it is a hot button issue once again this coming election cycle. And oh boy, not big fans of the old EFA program, to say the least. I mean, are you seeing across the board with Democrats in various New England states kind of that same kind of trend?
I think what we see nationally is the most popularity for the ESA programs right now is among the leadership is tending to come from red states and Republican governors. But I think an honest look by anyone who would have a nonpartisan perspective on the issue would be that these programs, researchers show they benefit the families, the students participating, and even the public schools that have to compete with them. So if we take this out of the realm of partisan politics, these programs are successful.
It's like it's wildly popular. I mean, there's a reason why, especially in New Hampshire, I feel like is a great case study for how it's like, oh, a few people take advantage of it. I think it was brought up in this article. I put in seacoastonline.com, had an article writing up the debate, which was between the various Democrats that are running for office. And they were listing numbers like, oh my gosh, it's exploded to millions. Well, it's exploded to millions of dollars because people are taking advantage of the program and finding value in it.
Right. Yeah, it's not a very apt comparison to try to make that point when we should be saying, hey, not how much money are we spending, but what kind of results are students getting, and maybe asking the question, why are families interested in this program in the first place? Because obviously they're not getting served in their assigned public school, and so they're looking for alternatives and options for their kids. So the question we should be asking is, why are these families wanting something different, and how well is the access to these programs working for those students?
And we get the constant argument, well, you only care about funding private schools. You don't care at all about the public school curriculum if you're a Republican that's voting for these programs. In New Hampshire, at least specifically, the Education Freedom Accounts also pay for things outside of, for students that are currently going to public schools but need outside educational opportunities because they're a special needs student. Maybe they just need a tutor in order to get up to the standards they need so they're not left behind and have to redo grades, or just in general, an unfortunate thing that happens in many public schools where they're just passed on to the next grade. Are we seeing, are there other programs like this that are that flexible in other states?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that argument of trying to pit public versus private schooling really kind of misses the boat. And New Hampshire's EFA program is one of the shining stars out there nationally in the ability of giving families a sort of flexible spending to choose private school tuition, or take private school tuition and some other form of expense, or just customizing their children's experience altogether through things like tutoring or services for children with disabilities, curriculum, or all sorts of things. Yeah, so we're seeing programs like this. ESAs right now are up to about 17 states the programs have been approved in, so there's real momentum behind them. But some of the programs in some states are allow families more flexibility than others. And some of those big states like Florida and Arizona are great examples as well.
What about the impact on families? A big ding that a lot of Democrats try and put against the program is, oh, it's just going to private schools that were already getting tuition dollars from these various families that are paying into it, which, to be frank, is a very silly argument considering the fact is now these families that are at what I think is 300% of the poverty limit are now able to use that money for food and rent, which is going through the roof right now. Any reflections on the nature of that aspect of these programs?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into trying to understand the fiscal impacts of a school choice program. But to make this argument in New Hampshire particularly is misguided because of the limited kind of nature of the program and the fact that a fair number of these families are switching from public schools. And the fact is that the amount of, like you said, the amount of money they're getting, which is about $5,000 on average, is considerably less than would be spent on them in the public school system. So every time a child switches from the public school to accept an EFA, they're saving the state a considerable amount of money. A recent analysis I've seen of the EFA program shows that overall it's actually saving the state a little bit of money. So the concerns about the bottom line and the budget of the state just don't add up for a New Hampshire situation.
So, looking over your bio, you've done work in the data and research aspect of these programs. Can you bring up maybe some things that stood out to you over that time that you spent?
Oh, sure. I mean, when you look at the range of research that's been done on education choice programs, and that it's a growing amount of research, we see, I think, the number one finding that kind of jumps out at you is the fact that in states where this has been studied the most, and Florida is probably that state where it's been studied the most, but others as well, the trend we see is that the public schools that are in these regions where school choice programs are enacted, the more students who are accepting the scholarships, the more options families have around them, actually creates an incentive for those public schools to improve and help the students left behind in the public schools. So again, trying to put this as a public versus private is really missing the point of the debate. It's a win-win situation when you realize that most of the kids in the state are probably going to stay in the public school system. There's always going to be a certain number of kids who are benefiting from these alternatives. And when you give these kids these alternatives and families the option to access them, it helps. It's like a rising tide that lifts all boats.
Any tips for lawmakers when they're continuing to refine our program we have in New Hampshire to make sure accountability is being held? Because it's obviously very important. We say we're conservatives. We want to minimize how much waste and such we may be having at the state level. What are some things lawmakers should maybe keep in mind to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to and we're not funneling money towards things that are going to be counterproductive?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot here we could unpack. So I think the first thing I would say is always important to remember that private school choice highlights the fact that the first and greatest accountability for a child's education is the parent. So keeping that intact is important. But at the same time, we want to recognize that the dollars being spent in the program are being spent, on reasonable things within line. New Hampshire is a real model for a lot of states, and the fact that they are like most other ESA programs, are keeping good tabs and making sure the guardrails are in place. So having that kind of transparency and accountability with the administrator of the program, we can see that these programs are spending money well. On the academic side, for accountability at ExcelinEd, we recommend kind of a balanced approach to making sure kids are making academic progress, and that involves allowing a range of different tests. The student has to be tested on some way to show they're making progress, but rather than forcing rather than forcing a child to take the state test, there could be a range of different tests they use, ones that fit with, either the kind of program the parent has selected or the private school that they're in. So kind of a flexible approach to academic accountability, not trying to make a private school choice or a ESA style program fit into the public school mold when it comes to accountability, but recognizing there are other ways we can track and measure kids' progress in these programs.
Do other states tend to have the same situation where it's the people that are pushing the program strongest aren't necessarily from the public education side of the house? So here in New Hampshire, Commissioner Edelblut has taken his fair share of criticism based on some of the things he said. He's very politically motivated when it comes to certain things, to be very straightforward on it. Is it that same way in many other states, or are there examples where some people who have worked in public ed are encouraging these programs?
I think this is going to look different in every state. So in some states, you have a Department of Education like New Hampshire's. Florida's another example where the officials have seen a track record of success with choice over years. And so I think that's one of the lessons we can take away is, so Florida, for example, first enacted private school choice about almost a quarter century ago. And the fact that that benefit to the students, the benefit to the public school system is observed, kind of builds an infrastructure of support. So even people who have worked in the public schools or those who are representing the State Department of Education, tend to see that it's a successful program and will back it up with support. You'll also see in Florida officials from both parties who are going to support the program as well. A lot of the states where ESAs are newer and fresher, that may or may not be the case as much.
Yeah.
So I think that just goes to show that this is a long-term effort, and so supporting that and keeping that going in the long haul is going to build that kind of support.
Yeah, and definitely look deeper before you start shooting down the program. I mean, a big thing, the reason why I had Kate Demers on the show a few weeks ago was people are saying, it's like, oh, the EFA program in New Hampshire is a black box. We don't know where the money's going. There's nothing like that. And she broke down case by case, like, we're looking at every single purchase. This is a very time-intensive situation where we make sure everything's reviewed. They've received tons of awards with regards to their transparency efforts and the ability to make sure that the money's going where it's supposed to. Because I mean, it seems like if there was this this program that was doing these things where it's funneling program in the wrong direction, it'd blow up all over the news. I mean, the left wing media, especially cable news, would be like, "Look at this! This is the reason why." And I have yet to see that kind of example that tremendous level. It's like, yeah, maybe someone bought a few books they weren't supposed to on it, and maybe that didn't get held accountable. But it seems like there's a lot of efforts to make sure the money is going where it's supposed to and not wasting anyone's tax dollars when possible.
Yeah, I think you can safely say the more we look at these programs, and again, New Hampshire is probably even near the top as far as a model for this kind of thing, that the level of accountability and transparency within a program that's aiding families is higher. The amount of misspending we see is considerably lower, and there's processes in place, whether it's the Education Freedom Account program in New Hampshire or another state, that if they catch that kind of misspending going on, the problem is resolved, the money is returned, and things move on. And trying to focus on these very small cases, blowing them out of proportion. You see these headlines in a few states, misses the boat when you're looking at the big picture of how these programs are helping thousands of students access something and just finding a different and better, more effective education opportunity. So people kind of get lost in the minutiae when they should be focused on programs that are really strong integrity and helping students.
So looking to the future, it's always good to plot a course ahead for what we want to do to either, is it primarily just expansion of the existing programs, or are there other innovations with regards to school choice and where funding goes that maybe we should be considering?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And again, I think we look at states where school choice has had the longest track record, also have the opportunity to kind of be the vanguard of innovation, as it were. And so, yes, it's about flexible spending for families. I think making sure that families have the access to that, thinking about ways to implement the program that use technology to help make the administration more cost effective. And that's a whole other big topic that's going to be ongoing for years, because states like New Hampshire are checking every time a family spends money to make sure it's being spent well. How do you keep doing that when the program gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and do it in a way that's effective for taxpayers? And I think the more we see these partnerships that we have between state education departments, nonprofits like the Children's Scholarship Fund, and technology companies that are helping them think through these things, I think there's an opportunity to solve these issues and make them even more cost effective than they already are. So there are opportunities to improve for sure. I think another area we're thinking about is as we want to see the programs grow to serve students, all students, many states have universal eligibility programs. How do we do that in a way that makes sure we're not losing track of the kids who have the greatest disadvantages, whether they're low income or special needs? So thinking about how do you fund those programs in a way that gives everybody the opportunity, but also gives a little bit more purchasing power to those families who need it the most. So I think those are probably two areas where we're going to see the most ripe for improvement.
So ExcelinEd, tell me a little bit about the organization and the work they do.
The Foundation for Excellence in Education. We work across the nation on a wide variety of education reform issues, student-centered focus to improve outcomes for kids. And so school choice is my policy area, but we also work in everything from literacy and digital education and school funding and accountability and other areas as well. So we kind of cover the gamut. Definitely, I guess, a student-centered accountability model that promotes excellent outcomes for kids. And I think school choice fits right into that purpose, because the research continues to show that families know what works best for their kids, and they tend to be getting the results for them as well.
Awesome. So ExcelinEd.org, if anyone wants to learn more about them. Hope to have more of your experts on the show in the future. I feel like this is something that New Hampshire is just scratching the surface of, and we can get more education choice in the state. So Ben DeGrow, Senior Policy Director for Education Choice at ExcelinEd, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. It was an honor and pleasure to be here.
NewEnglandTake.com to get more from the show. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're checking us out on YouTube, and we'll talk to you soon.